that they are already influencing Europe and making some of the countries in Europe really questioning the whole integration process. They are being successful.
Well, again, I think that the world understands much better nowadays that the real challenge for its values comes from international terrorism and those forces that are not interested in our values. I think that this is better understood. International terrorism knows no borders, recognizes no frontiers. International terrorism we have seen targeted everywhere from Mumbai and New York and Madrid and you name it. I mean, almost every big city in the world was subjected to terrorism. I think that an added aspect to this is what we are seeing in the Middle East nowadays. I mean, and the Middle East nowadays is going through a tremendous political earthquake. I mean, with so many different elements being added into it. First of all definitions do not exist. Look at Syria. Syria does not exist for all practical purposes. You have three Syrias. The Syria of the Alawites, of Assad. You have Syria of the rebels. You have Syria of the terrorist organizations, and everybody is fighting everybody, and now the Russians are also party to it. I mean, you look at this human tragedy of 250,000 people massacred by their own leaders, and millions of refugees all over in Lebanon and in Jordan. By the way, when I was ambassador in Paris, I was subjected to so many demonstrations against Israel, especially during the war. And at a certain point, some of these demonstrations were very violent. I will remember forever the demonstration at the Place de la République with 16,000 people shouting death to Israel and marching on a synagogue. But in all of my years in Paris, I have not seen even one small, single demonstration to support the poor Syrians that are being killed by their own people. But going back to your question, you see a disintegration of existing structures. Libya does not exist as a state. Yemen is not there. Syria does not exist. Iraq, who knows what Iraq is. You see the emergence of a group of terrorists, 35 to 40,000, very rich, very motivated, that have as a goal the establishment of a caliphate in that part of the world. You have the tensions now between Sunnis and Shiites at a very high point. So you're talking about a very, very different Middle East. When it comes to Europe, yes, I mean, the question of integration, of absorption is now one of the main questions, and you see different forces moving or pushing in different directions. The key, and I'm not here to tell the Europeans what to do or what not to do. I mean, I have enough tourists telling my people what to do, what not to do. But I think that the key is integration. The key is integration. If people are integrated into your society, it's one thing. If not, it's what we see. Yes, please.
You're talking about integration, but isn't this more a world problem? I mean, Daesh is not the only one around. It's throughout the world, from Myanmar to South America to China. And we're getting a lot of groups that are not socially integrated into their own culture, where you have multi-ethnic, multi-religious cultures which are not integrated and accepted. And you're saying integration, but integration means social, religious acceptance throughout. And I find that with the openness of communication, which is wonderful, I'm not discrediting that, we're not getting into a true integration, into true social integration. And I find that to be much a more serious problem than just in the Middle East, but throughout.
Well, if I was not clear, then I will restate this. These are two separate things. Daesh poses, a relatively new phenomenon in the Middle East. This is a group of terrorists that is well equipped, that is very rich in resources, and they have also a territorial hold. I mean, they have a piece of territory, and their aims are very clear, but they pose a challenge to the entire world community because they behead or decapitate not only Muslims, but also Europeans, Americans, and a world challenge must be answered by a world answer. And the world answer is for the world to join hands in acting against this menace. But I added that the most important element in that is sometimes forgotten, and this is the Arab world. Daesh, after all, is after its Arab neighbors. It's their territories. Daesh is not far away from the Gulf. Daesh is not far away from Jordan. And this is why you see the moderate Arab countries uniting against this, but they should not be forgotten as part of the answer as to how to tackle this menace. The question of integration is a different story, but here again, I'm not here to give advice. And by the way, you see Daesh also in the Sinai, and you see how the Egyptians are fighting the Ansar Bet al-Maqdis, and and you see it everywhere. So there, you must have a concerted action. The other part is really the question of minorities or the Muslim minorities in Europe. But here, you see, I'm a bit reluctant of trying to give the European advices. I mean, I know the situation in my country. I know what we do with people coming our way in fully integrating them into society. And I believe that this is the success this is the story of the Israeli success. I mean, I mentioned those who came from the former Soviet Union, highly motivated, high level of education. The government provided jobs and provided housing and provided, and today, I mean, you cannot tell who is of this origin and who is of that origin. When it comes to Europe, I mean, I have, as I said, enough on my plate without advising them what to do. Yes, please.
Me?
Yeah, we'll give the lady.
My question is also in regards to integration, but maybe from a different angle. I'm from Austria, and I grew up in Vienna all my life. And I feel like the main identity of the Jewish community is a very united one, and it's one not against, but in opposition to an Austrian narrative towards the Holocaust, towards the Second World War, and towards the history of Judaism in Austria. And right now, from what my mother tells me, was very active in an organization that's called Shalom Aleikum, and they're helping Muslim families to integrate into Viennese society from a Jewish point of perspective. And they're getting a lot of criticism within the Jewish community. And my mother tells me that the community is very divided right now in people that say the heritage of the Jewish community in Austria makes them believe that they need to help the refugees coming into the country, and it's their obligation to help people in refugee status, and the others that are afraid of Muslim people or a stronger Muslim community in Austria, and are having a tendency to xenophobia and being very scared of a Muslim presence in the country. So how do you see this divide within the Jewish communities in Europe?
Well, you told me your personal story, and I tell you my personal story. I was born in Jerusalem. I always say that Paris is the most beautiful city on earth, New York is the most interesting, but Jerusalem is the most important. I was born in the city of Jerusalem to a family that came from an Arab country. My parents came from Morocco to Israel. I mean, they lived there for a generation. The relationship, for the most part, between Jews and Muslims in Morocco were very good for many, many years. To this very day, there's a Jewish community in Morocco, and they are protected by the king. Morocco, if I'm not mistaken, is the only Arab country where in the constitution you have the Moroccans as the Jews as the citizens of number one. Number two, I represent here Hebrew University of Jerusalem. We have 23,000 students, and I'm very proud of the fact that we have among them 1,700 Arabs, Muslims for the most part. I mean, and because I truly believe in the value of education, and I truly believe in the value of the tremendous contribution that education, and especially higher education, can do to promote the chances of living together and of peace. I mean, this together with the economic development. So I don't really know what this divide is, of course. And I think that we will be, again, I lived in France for 5 years, and there are many millions of Muslims living in France. I mean, to identify them with this small bunch of terrorists, I think we'll be mistaken. Again, and I gave you a few examples of those that we worked very closely with in order to have this rapprochement between the Jewish and the Muslim community in Israel, and I'm very proud of this effort. So I don't know about the divide, and about Austria, I have to admit that I'm not that much of an expert on your former country. Please.
Two questions. First, at which extent the recent acts of terror in France have changed the immigration policies of the French government towards refugees from Syria and other Muslim countries? That's my first question. And the second one, we know that one of the main victims of ISIS, of Daesh, have been the Christian minorities in the Arab countries, and Europe as being the bearer of the Christian civilization hasn't said anything about this, and at which extent Israel has a PR opportunity as showing the world that the only place in the Middle East where Christians are safe is Israel.
Well, I'll start with your second question, and with there are two very important questions. I'll start with the second one, and with all due respect, I don't want even to treat this question as a PR question.
Okay.
I mean, Israel, well, before Israel, one of the greatest tragedies that you see in the Middle East is what is happening to Christians in the Middle East. I mean, yes, you read a lot of articles about the Chrétiens d'Orient, about the Christians of the Orient, about but, you know, as somebody who grew up in Jerusalem, not too far away from Bethlehem and Bejala, which when I was a kid, well, not a kid, I mean, we're mostly Christian, but you see in all the Middle East, I mean, you see that the numbers of Christians are dwindling. We do have in Israel a small minority of Christians that live in the country, and we are very proud of the fact that they are equal citizens like everybody else. I mean, but again, this is a small minority. Yes, it is true, there was once an act of hooligans against one of the churches there, but the fact is...
Not clear.
Well, when I said hooligans, I didn't mean but it is a tragedy. It is a tragedy, and I think that the free world should really devote much more attention to this, to what is happening to the Christians. By the way, not only to the Christians, also to some endangered minorities in our part of the world. I'm talking about the Yazidis, I'm talking about the Kurds, I'm talking about again, because I, like you, believe that everybody has the right, whether he is Jewish or Christian or Muslim, to live in security and in peace in the place where he was born and in the place. As far as the situation in France, France is home to the largest Muslim community in Europe. Again, nobody knows the exact numbers because it's not politically correct and it's against the law to ask someone for his religion.
Really?
Besides, in France, they made out of the secularism, they call it laïcité. They made the religion out of laïcité, out of the separation of state, and this is total. I mean, but France is home, you know. We have 67 million French now. The figures I heard are everything between 6 and 7 to 11 and 12 million people that live in France. I mean, what the French, I think, and this is my interpretation, the French understand nowadays that they have to put much more, and they are putting much more, and this is the state of emergency that they declare. They're putting much more into opening an eye on what their citizens are doing in places like, you know, Daesh, like how will this affect the debate in Europe with the Germans on one side and with the Hungarians and the others on the other side? I mean, it is yet to be seen. Please ask me about my university.
I was going to ask regarding the